friends, it has been a great privilege given to me to mention some few words about our own dear Mr. Venkatachalaya. Mr. Venkatachalaya was born in 25th October 1929, and he was the 25th Chief Justice of India. He served as the Chief Justice from the year 1993 to 94. Currently serves on the Advisory Board of Foundation of Restoration of National Values, a society established in 2008 that strives to restore national and cultural values of India. He earned not only his Bachelor in Science, but also his Bachelor in Law from University of Mysore. He started practice in the year 1951. He was appointed as a permanent judge of the High Court of Karnataka on November 1975 and was elevated as a judge of the Supreme Court on 5th October 1987. Finally, he became the Chief Justice on 12th February 1993. He subsequently retired on 25th October 94. Post-retirement, he has continued to work on anti-corruption and human rights issues, including support for the launch of initiatives of change of Center for Governance. He served as the chairman of National Human Rights Commission from 96 to 98. In 2000, he headed a national commission to review the working of the Constitution, which took a great lot of efforts and one of the visionary documents that has been ever produced by a jurist. He has been conferred with the honors of Padma Vibhushan, Doctor of Letters from Pondicherry University, Doctor of Laws, Honoris Causa of Manipal University, Honorary Doctor from Rani Chennamma University, Belgaum. He has written several books, and one of them is about the parliamentary. He also served on the parliamentary panel Lok Sabha calls, and we are really indeed grateful to him for having come and spent time and then enlighten us about certain views of Veda, what he has. I, for one, am really delighted to be a part of this program because I have seen him as a lawyer. I have appeared before him as a judge, not only in the High Court but also Supreme Court. And it's a great honor to be here.
May I please request all the members of the audience to please come and occupy the front chairs, please. Please, David, munde banni.
Mr. Ramdas, Mrs. Ramdas, Dr. Suresh, very distinguished and respected invitees and guests. I am at a loss to find some justification for my extraneous presence before connoisseurs of Sanskrit and Vedas. I have to invent some justification for it. Some years ago, the Indian Science Congress wanted me to address them. I told them that my claims to present myself before a group of scientists are far from legitimate. But they won't leave me. Then I found a thin excuse. The Indian Science Congress itself was established by a judge, Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee. He was himself the first president of the Indian Science Congress. That emboldened me to say that at least I have the legacy of the great judge. And I spoke on a topic called the Ionian enchantment. There is a philosopher in Ionia way back 2,500 years ago who said if you study subjects insularly, study physics, mathematics, psychology, philosophy as watertight insular compartments of intellectual excellence, you build knowledge, you won't build ability. It is only when these areas merge and there is a convergence of knowledge, then you build ability. Science is knowledge, technology is ability. And you have this metaphor of this kind of process of integration of knowledge in your handheld cell phone. A mobile phone perhaps represents one of the most brilliant and exciting integrations of various fields of knowledge. We are speaking of an area, speaking of Vedas. The most distinguished scientist once said that scientific knowledge is no more experimental, it is intuitive. The Newtonian physics was that you have an observation, you have an experiment, an observation and an inference. Even today you find in the Royal Society, the board says, nulli assit verba. Don't take any man's word for it. Don't take any man's word for it. Everything must be proved by scientific evidence. And unless you have evidence of proof in the sense in which you need, your senses are the judges of the truth of it, truth or otherwise of it, we can't accept it. This was the prevailing mood of the scientific temper. And when Einstein took over the reins of scientific contemplation, he said when we deal with heavenly bodies, the movement of stars and stellar formations of astronomy, we can't conduct an experiment in a laboratory. They are not amenable to our senses. The Hubble telescope had not come then. It's only recently that instrument was available. Then he said, it's not hypothesis fingo, it is hypothesis non fingo. And it is as long as we intuit, the scientific principle is intuitive. And as long as it explains the phenomenal world, it is truth for the time being. And you can't go back to that old system of speculation and experiments. This perhaps is the kind of a partial reflection of the method in which the rishis intuited. They became the drashtaras. They are the seers. We call a Brahmin a harva. That is a corrupted form of the word parvan, the one who sees, a seer. Of course, not all Brahmins are seers today, and many seers are not Brahmins. That's another matter. But the definition of Brahmin itself is a very exciting area of exploration. Gautam Buddha, he defined who a Brahmin was. And it is in the Sutta Pitika of Dhammapada, he defines a Brahmin. And if you read that Brahmin, most of us have got to hide our faces and say, well, better that we disown that title or self-appointed appellation of a Brahmin. And Swami Ranganathananda in his commentaries on the Bradharanyaka refers to it and makes his own comment on that. Some time ago, it was perhaps some time in the mid-60s, a very famous American philosopher, he said, philosophical thought, philosophical endeavor, philosophical effort is purely a Western phenomenon. he discarded the possibility of philosophic thinking in the East at all. But a professor of Harvard University, Edward White, who wrote a beautiful introduction to a very magnificent text on Hindu epistemology, that's called The Methods of Knowledge, written by Swami Satprakashananda. In that introduction he said, this audacious remark of the professor that philosophical contemplations are purely a Western phenomenon, the sweeping audacity of it is negatived by the very title of the book by Sir Arthur Bertrand Russell, who wrote the History of Western Philosophy. Long after the content of the book is forgotten, the title will be remembered for its implication that the vast field of philosophical thought outside the Western world, and that's the implication of the title. The Vedic method, we go into, there are two parts of it, as of course scholars will say. The Samhita part of it, the propitiation of deities, power centers, conceptualized power centers. And they go to the extent of saying there are performances in the Vedas itself to harm somebody and even to kill somebody. You can perform a ritual for harming others. And Dasgupta in his History of Indian Philosophy says, how do we reconcile it with our conception of dharma? The kind of the Samhita part of it, the ritualistic part of it. That part is admittedly the Aparavidya, it's not the Paravidya. Then you have the other side of it, the Upanishads, the extraordinary speculations of man's eternal spiritual quest. It is something which is impossible to believe that human mind could attain to that level of contemplation on matters which are beyond the senses. And in the Upanishads, you see the other side of it, the Jnana Kanda, the Karma Kanda and the Jnana Kanda. And scholars say that it's the Aranyakas and the Brahmanas that are the bridge between them. You have the use Tara, that word, the bridge, is used very interestingly in the Vedas. They said, if you, in some Veda, for example, you say, you are addicted to miserliness. If a man is a miser, Adanam, the only cure for Adanam, Danam Tara, that is, Dana is the only cure for Adana, that's the bridge. The Tara is the bridge. And that in the Upanishadic, then you have these contradictions. And they are not mutually opposed is the word of great scholars and those who expounded this for us. The first part, and that, in my opinion, if you see the qualifications required for practicing this prayoga and for learning it, that is a presentation of the concept of power and responsibility. Power must be vested only in those who are responsible for the responsible exercise of that power. And that's why they prescribe the strictest regimen, qualifications for even approaching the study. In fact, in Yaska's Nirukta, the Vedamata tells the teacher, don't entertain a fellow, don't impart this knowledge to a fellow whom you are not sure is pure. His mind is not diverted by worldly attractions. And they prescribe this. And the Siksha part of it tells you what are the strict prescriptions for acquiring this power. This power, this is the concept of responsibility that goes with power. Power is a very heady thing. It may be physical power, the economic power, it is any kind of power. The very definition of power is that it is something which has an innate tendency to run to excess. Put power into the hands of anybody, you be sure that it runs into excess. It's political power. In fact, I have seen, to my shock, even the judicial power has a tendency to run to excess. That's a power over deciding whether a power is exercised responsibly or not. even that power tends to run to excess. And this kind of thing, unless there is a preparation for receiving the Vedic wisdom, it requires a lot of preparation and a background of understanding in what context it came up. Max Muller says it's about 1,200 years before Christ. Somebody puts it earlier. Those days there were no instruments to measure even physical dimensions of the universe. There is no telescope, there is no microscope, there is nothing. Their powerful, intuitive power of meditation put mind, put consciousness above the limits of Prakriti and then liberate it from the fold, the control of the senses. And at that heightened level of contemplation and that heightened level of meditative excellence, that in the superconscious state, you intuit. This is a product, the intuition, the sharas. They are not the creators of this thing. They are visualized it in their wisdom, having led a clean life, which makes it possible for you and makes you eligible for access to this kind of knowledge. There is a great debate about teleology and mechanism. People say evolution is a mechanical evolution. Accidentally, life came into force. There are beautiful works, even Western, for example, Henry Bergson's Creative Evolution is a remarkable thing. The urge of life to curiosity of life, the dimensions of curiosity. Even a single cell animal, insect, has inbuilt curiosity in it. And that makes it, the senses developed as an expression of the curiosity of a single cell amoeba or whatever thing. And his work is perhaps the Nobel laureate. Creative Evolution was one of the most remarkable books of our times. Then there is how did this world life came as a matter of accident. It is a byproduct of some chemical combination suddenly that occurred in heat and moist heat, because the definition of the conditions in which life emerged have been described beautifully by Bergson. But another great scientist said, you required so many things to happen in succession. Many things have had to happen in succession for life to emerge on the planet. The first thing is that the tilt of the earth, the speed of the earth around the sun is 1,000 miles per hour. If it is more, seasons become longer and lesser depending on the speed, or lesser more. The tilt of the earth is 23 degrees. If it is more, the seasons are longer. If it is less, seasons are, then you will have cold spells. You will have 3 years winter, 3 years of summer. And then the moon was at least 5% nearer than what it is. The seas would rise up and inundate the whole surface of the earth. 1/5 of the planet is land, and for 2/5 is water. So water would inundate the whole thing. If the sea was 5 feet lesser, there will be no oxygen for the animals. Then you say the earth's crust was 10 feet more than what it is. It would absorb all the oxygen and life would be impossible. And how could all these things would happen in succession in that order? It's not only those events must happen, but they must happen in the sequence in which they have occurred. He said, you put 10 coins marked 1 to 10 in your pocket, give a shuffle, take out one, and put it back and shuffle it again. Then you take the second. The chances of you are getting 1 to 10 in a serial order is 1 in 1,000 million. The permutation combinations will tell you that that if you take it out, number one coming first, you put that back, again shuffle, take out number two, so on, 1 to 10 coming up in that order, the chances are in the statistical probability is 1 in 1,000 million. And these events that happen preceding the emergence of life on the planet could be more complicated. It could be 1 in 10,000 because so many factors had to come up in sequence. It is not merely occurring sporadically. It must occur in sequence. This is the mystery of creation. Sir James Jeans in his work, he describes this indescribable arcane mysterious beauty of creation. He calls it the arcane mysterious beauty. This mystery is what Vedas speak of. They speak of wonderment. This wonderment is the Vignaya Vismayo Yoga Bhumika. That for that, this is sense of wonderment. And it is said that those people every morning went to the riverside, watched the sun to come up. It happens, if it happens once in 10 years, we'll pay $1,000 to visit it. It happens every day, unfortunately. And unfortunately for us, that we won't even get up before the sun comes up. So that, and he says all of them would go to the riverside, watch for the sun to come up. And then when the sun emerged, they would say, okay, they come up with a freshness of emotion that presented it. And this, of course, there are other things which scientists, for example, most of the commentators speak of a geocentric constellation. Earth is the center, and then the sun and the moon go around the earth. This is the concept of this thing. And physicists don't accept it. There are many raised scientific eyebrows about many of these assertions. In fact, Shankara's comment itself says that the sun moves and at the end merges in the Vayu. It is the Vayu that pushes the sun in its orbit. They are all allegorical. If you take it physically, it becomes a little, it's impossible to understand them. They are all allegoric. What Vayu represents, what kind of power that it represents, what is its significance in the scheme of things. These are all things which perhaps are a little difficult to understand. I have said the same thing. What Vedas mean to me, many people may say it doesn't matter what it means to you or not, but the Vedas don't depend for their authority on whether somebody, it means something to somebody at all. And it is, to me, a complex intellectual, emotional stimulation of an awesome human achievement, not through the gross senses of the human frame or the intellect, but through the means not yet taught to the Western world of extrasensory superconscious state to explain the complex and seemingly irresolvable issues of man's eternal spiritual quest. How does a man know the truth that is beyond the range of his senses and out of the reach of his reason? There are many things which are outside our senses. For example, you can't hear all the sound in the world. The sonic waves which are tympanum, the eardrum can accept is only particular decibels. Beyond that you can't, supersonic, subsonic vibrations are not audible to us. Our ears are tuned only for a particular level of vibrations. And there are things which we can't hear and we can't see. Then how does a man know the truth that is beyond the range of his senses and out of the reach of his reason? According to most religions, great saints and seers intuit the truth in a superconscious state. That's not irrational, but supra-rational. The extrasensory perception of truth is the hallmark of the method. Then the yearning of the soul for access to the kingdom of God is as old as man himself. The Old Testament exhorted, I quote, "Hear, O Lord, my cry. Give ear to my prayer. Give ear unto my prayer, that goeth not out of feigned lips, that goeth not out of feigned lips. Hold up my goings in thy path, that my footsteps slip not. Show thy ways, O Lord, teach me thy path and lead me in thy truth. Thou art the God of my salvation. Open thou my eyes, that I may behold the wondrous things out of thy law. Quicken thou me according to thy work. Remove from me the way of lying." There's exactly the same word the Vedas use. And then a man says, how to pure yours. This has been perhaps all the great texts of seers all over the world, the Parsis, the Muslims, the Christians. They're all entitled to be called the Vedas in their own way, in a larger, generous definition, more expanded definition of that word used in an eclectic sense. Our real personality, this is our real personality is deeper than the conscious level, but we live only in the conscious level, and therefore we are really not living in ourselves. Hence we do not want God at present. Somebody, Augustine, said, "Oh Lord, make me holy, but not today. I've got something to do today." This is the problem. But when you go deep beneath your conscious level, beneath your subconscious and unconscious also, further down, deeper than the unconscious, even, you enter the metaphysical level, the ontological being. This is the go deeper than what you seem to be, what is inside the body. You will find that it is the mind. What is inside the mind? It is the intellect. What is inside the intellect? It is deep sleep. What is inside the intellect? In deep sleep, the body is not there, the mind is not there, the intellect is not there. But are you there? In deep sleep, are you there or are you not there? You are there. Have you a doubt? Are you existing in the state of deep sleep or are you not existing? Are you alive or dead in deep sleep? Perhaps you are alive. How do you know? How do you know that you are alive? Who told you? When you had no consciousness of your existence in sleep, how do you make the statement that you are alive there, you were alive there? It is a hearsay or a real fact. Now you are stumbling on something which is the mystery of your being. That which you are in the state of deep sleep is your real personality. Not intellect, not mind, not the senses, not the body, not your relations, not friends, not enemies, not gold nor silver. Without anything you existed. And let us know what is it that existed at that time. That is your ontological truth and status. This is the message of all these things, and this is what is presented in the Vedas in the most brilliant way, and many people have. This is the eternal story of all spiritual quests. Amidst the great transformations in the world of science and technology, the world of science has no answers to the eternal questions that are raised in man's inmost self. The Vedas are this product of superconscious intuition. It is not the product of logic or mentation. It is the highest achievement of human consciousness through dedication or Shraddha. Shraddha pertains to the path of Jnana, when logic leads to Vijnana. And in a beautiful article, Bertrand Russell, in essays on mysticism and logic, he says logic is not relevant. Logic is relevant when you have to make a choices amongst a plural or a multiple situation. You have to make a choice, but you have no choice and there is a unity that you pursue. Logic has no place. It is merely the intuition that is the place. And you find the final unity, it is only intuition that guides you and not logic. And that's nobody can accuse Bertrand Russell of sentimentalism, and perhaps his logic is very incisive and very cruel sometimes. Vedas are both the beginning and celebration of knowledge. Knowledge of the principles behind our creation. How the world came about is the business of science. Why it came is the business of philosophy. And Vedas are a beautiful attempt to explain the interdependence, the integrated universal and cosmic forces. It seeks to explain the great philosophical riddle about this world and the man, and any power, if any, that guides and controls this interrelationship between the world and the man. This power we may call the Paramatma, the God. That this relationship cannot be explained by logic or the finite human mind is all too obvious. It is the product of intuition of the rishis. A rishi is by definition is one who has arrived at his destination. The very word means that. This exercise is not amenable to physical examination. It is not a process of intellect or of cerebration. Where senses cannot penetrate, the intellect can also not enter. In a beautiful sum up, Aurobindo said this of the Vedic culture and Vedic method. Veda, I quote, Veda then is a creation of the age anterior to our intellectual philosophies. In that original epoch, thought proceeded by other methods than those of our logical reasoning and speech, by accepted modes of expression which in our modern habits would be inadmissible. There are no means of this kind of process of logic had not evolved. Human cunning, human intellect, all this kind of work was unknown to these people. So they resorted to a much better thing of approaching things by intuition, by contemplation. The wisest then depended on the inner experience and suggestions of the intuitive mind for all knowledge that ranged beyond mankind's ordinary perceptions and daily activities. Their aim was illumination, not logical conviction. Their ideal inspired seer, not the accurate reasoned man. Indian tradition has faithfully preserved this account of the origin of the Vedas. The rishi was not the composer of the hymn, but the seer or the mere drashara of eternal truth and an impersonal knowledge. The language of Veda is itself Shruti, a rhythm not composed by intellect, but heard by divine words that came vibrating out of the infinite to the inner audience of the man who had previously made himself fit for receiving that impersonal knowledge. This is in a tribute, in an explanation, how things are allegoric in Vedas. Max Muller says this. The dawn, the Ushas, there's a hymn in the praise of the Ushas, the dawn. He says the dawn, which to us is merely a beautiful sight, was to the early gazer and thinker the problem of all problems. The morning itself, sunrise itself was the problem of all problems. It was the unknown land from where, this is where man comes, he also comes from an unknown land. It was the unknown land from whence rose every day those bright emblems of a divine power which left in the mind of man the first impressions and intimations of another world, of power above, of order and wisdom pervading. What we simply call the sunrise, brought before their eyes every day, the riddle is the riddle of all riddles, riddle of existence itself. The days of their lives sprang from the dark abyss, which every morning seemed instinct with light and life. Their youth, their manhood, their old age, all were to the Vedic bards the gift of that heavenly mother who appeared bright, young, unchained, immortal every morning. The whole theogony and philosophy of the ancient world centered in the dawn, the mother of bright gods, of the sun in the various aspects, of the morn that day, the spring herself, the brilliant image and visage of mortality. He goes on to say, this is the story of every human being. He is born, becomes old and vanishes. Then again comes from some unknown abyss. This is the Ushas is the symbol of this eternity of man's appearance and disappearance. Vedas are the unfoldment of all wonderment. Wonderment is the beginning of knowledge. It is a different culture of knowledge where knowledge and power, knowledge and the knower become one. In that sense, the intuitive expressions and outpourings of great seers of all religions qualify in a broad sense to be called Vedas, using that expression in a universal eclectic sense. The other message of the Vedic culture is that aspirant must be as pure as they aspire. Yaskas Nirukta refers to the injunction of the Vedamata to the one who has treasured the Vedas in his heart. She commands him, I am to you a great treasure. Do not impart it to those indisciplined in life and are not committed to truth. The Bhagavad Gita also enjoins that this secret treasure, Krishna says, don't give it to my enemies. He said, don't impart this knowledge to my enemies. He uses that word, that I enjoy this secret treasure. It cannot be accessed by the impure at heart. The Vedas are in two parts. The first is the Samhita, which speak of the world and its affairs. Second is the Upanishad that speak of the Atman and the other world beyond life on earth. Brahmanas and the Aranyakas are the bridge between them. The two, Samhitas and the Upanishads, are the Karma Kanda and the Gnana Kanda respectively. They are not mutually antagonistic. But the method is in faith. Faith and logic are two different things. Mr. Gundappa puts it beautifully. If I say 9 into 9 is 81 and you accept it, it is Shraddha. If I say 9 into 9 is 81, you have 81 tamarind seeds grouped into 9 groups of 9 and count every them. It is logic, it is tarka. See, some things are amenable only to logic and some things are amenable only to intuition. This is the latter part is the Vedic method. Method is not hypothesis fingo, it is hypothesis non fingo. That you can't see these things. There are things beyond our senses, beyond our reasoning, power of reasoning. How do you access them? This is the secret of the Vedic method. And that is the first treasure. Now the scientists are getting into it. Einstein is the first scientific philosopher who said, this is not amenable to reasoning. I can't conduct an experiment. I can't make an inference. I only guess and imagine. And this is intuitive. He uses the word, it's purely intuitive. The worldly part of the Vedas and many statements and exhortations, they have raised many scientific hackles and eyebrows. This is when the Vedas imply a geocentric constellation and they speak of many things which are inconsistent with our own observation. That's why Shankara says, if the Vedas say that fire is cold, don't accept it. But I am assuring you that Vedamata will not say such a thing. Therefore, I assure you that this is, if it is beyond your physical verification, then you don't have to accept it. And the first part of the Karma Kanda is not the Para Vidya. The Apara Vidya is the second part, the Upanishads. This is what they say. When this geocentric and of course we have had the Greeks spoke of the central fire, that is a heliocentric universe. Then under the Christian superstition, mythology, it became this. And there are many other things which are so subtle in the method, more than the content, the method of approach to things which are beyond our capacity of senses. This system of learning is different from the Western system of education. This is a new system which is new to the Western world, but it is accepted as the only system by which, without help, you see people sit in a corner in the Surya Siddhanta. They predict an eclipse happening 3,000 years later. And they don't have these telescopes or the movement and all that. And this as a system of education and knowledge is perhaps the most unique in the universe, in the world, in the history of man. This is where what Vedas mean to me is the enormity of their range and purport. Both the method of perception and the perceived are awesome, both in their novelty and destinations. This is why it may become trackless wilderness for one who rushes into it without intellectual preparation and spiritual guidance. That is where a teacher of geography and a teacher of Vedanta are different. You won't go and prostrate before a teacher of geography, but whenever you meet your teacher of philosophy, you prostrate before him. This is because his method is different. His purity of mind is the tool. Here, the experiment is the tool. Again, what Vedas mean to me is their capacity to teach men of the glory and process of the means of perception, as they perhaps unconsciously taught the modern physicists at the departure in the philosophy of science of Einsteinian physics and its departure from the Newtonian physics. Most impressive part of the Vedic speculation pertains to the creation and origin of the earth and cosmology. They are almost coming near to the Big Bang is being now. There's a great experiment going on in the border between Italy and France, and and 400 feet below the ground, 28 kilometers of tubing. They are conducting this nuclear bombardment, to simulate conditions that existed 1 second after the Big Bang. And they say the age of the earth is almost near the contemplations in our Vedic literature. While, of course, I am not deriding any other thing, Christianity is a very interesting thing. I'm not, kindly don't think that I'm ridiculing any philosophy, but it's a very interesting study. In what they say is, the creation, age of the earth in Christian mythology, in Dante's Divine Comedy, what is the Judgment Day? He gives in 1810, year of 1810 is the Judgment Day. Of course, we are past 200 years after that. The world will come to an end is this. And Archbishop James Ussher, he wrote a book called Annals of the Old and New Testament, in which he says the earth was created. Week of creation was Friday, 28th October 4004 BC. That would be about 6,000 years. Please don't think that Christianity has a great contribution to make for our philosophy. But you can see how superstition can take over. Our Nasti Sukta, he says, we don't know, who knows? I don't know, you don't know, who knows is the answer, the end of it. Then John Lightfoot added that Adam was born on Friday, 28th October 4004 at 9 a.m. I don't know how kind of midwifery we can think of. See, then it happened. All this kind of Christian superstition. Of course, we have also our superstitions. And when Galileo, Newton, and Copernicus, the 17th century, modern mind is said to be the product of the 17th century science. When their discoveries came up, Newton himself was a devout Christian. He called his mathematics heavenly calculus. But the effect it had on Christian faith was enormous. The 18th century was a very restless century. 19th century was a skeptic century, where a British king said half his bishops were atheists. 20th century was the bloodiest century. We have killed 230 million people in 20th century, 160 million in wars and 60, 70 million people in civil strife, commotions, riots, not unrelated to ethnicity, language, and a whole host of things that divide man from man. But I am comparing the intuitive range of the mind of the seers of the past, and there, as a matter of method of contemplation, it's a tough thing. A man has to observe so much of discipline in life to be able to put his consciousness into a state of samadhi. Then they can perceive it is perceived in a superconscious state, not logically reasoned out. And to apply reasoning to such a process is to confuse both the process and the product. And this is what ultimately, to me, it means. And then I have 3 minutes left, and I would like to say something about language as the modern man genetically is not different from his predecessor some 40,000 years ago. Genetical framework. But the progression and indeed the total transformation is for all to see. What the 40,000 year ago, what man was, what we called them savages, and what kind of a sophisticated edition or version of a human being we see. With all the power of evolution may be a reason for everything. Life itself, from its simple origins, evolved into a state of great complexity. The Nobel scientist Bergson provides a gripping account of this great progressive transformation of life. Charles Darwin, in his Origin of Species, spoke, "There is a grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers having been originally breathed into a few forms or into one. From so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been evolved." But the gist of the matter is how Sanskrit was contributory to this excellence of how it disciplined the mind itself. Anne Tattersall, curator of the American Museum of Natural History, says this: Homo sapien is not simply an improved version of his ancestor, but is a new concept by itself, qualitatively distinct from them. A totally unprecedented entity has appeared on the earth. All the major intellectual attributes of modern man are tied up in some way or the other with the language. And then I have James Fano, who speaks of Sanskrit as the culture of this transformation of man. It's a beautiful study. I think thank you very much for your patience and courtesy. There is some pages are intermixed. I'll send it tomorrow. Send somebody. See, these pages are interposed here. Yes. So you'll not be able to make out this thing. It's intended to be uttered into thin air and not perpetuated in print. Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have listened to a very brilliant lecture by a virtual polymath who knows more than one discipline and is a master of the same. There is a statement in Charaka Samhita: he who studies but one discipline does not even know even that very discipline. Ekam shastram adheyanaha shastrantam naiva gacchati. And therefore, one ought to be multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary in his approach. Justice Venkatachalaya has very well laid stress on the power of intuition and the kind of vision that the scientists called the rishis had. The perception of the rishis was by itself very different in its nature. He referred to the idea of the kind of discipline in distributing knowledge. He cited the verse of Yaska, where Vidya approaches Brahmana and Vidya says, Vidya havai Brahmana majagama, gopayamam shevadhishtehamasmi, na asuyakaya, andrajave, shathaya, do not give me. So, Viryavati ithasyam. So, knowledge is to be imparted only to the right kind of people, to the ones that deserve. The essential idea being that knowledge will not be abused and misused. We have all heard the regretful statement of Einstein, who grieved that his famous formula E equals mc squared was put to the most riotous use, and that only made him regret the publication of his discovery. And therefore, the present trend of being too very democratic with knowledge, of distributing every kind of knowledge to everyone, we all know that some of the best of minds who are quite intelligent, quite well educated, engineers and doctors involved in terrorist activities. So these are not people who did on account of sheer, say, economic penury or lack of education. So that is why we must know what we are giving to whom and what are the qualifications of the recipient. Mr. Venkatachalaya also gave the example of the shuffling of coins and the possibility of getting 10 coins in a particular sequence. This has also been called the monkey theorem in the history of science, where even if you give a million years for a monkey and a typewriter, it cannot produce one sonnet of Shakespeare. So, even with a million years, it's not possible. He gave the excellent example of James Jeans in his excellent book, The Mysterious Universe. So, who says the world is no more like a big machine, it's like a big mind, great mind. So, I cannot list the merits of our learned speaker. The mystery that life presents every day. There is a beautiful saying in Panchatantra. It says, there are certain things that are ever new. It says, Adityas yodayaha tata tambulam bharati kata ishta bharya sumitrancha apurvani dine dine. Every day these are new things. So the sunrise, Adityas yodayaha tambulam bharati katha, the relish of the Mahabharata story, ishta bharya, a beloved wife and a good friend, are new every day. There lies a mystery in the ushas, so for which the great sages have composed their hymns. And our speaker also spoke of the ushas coming every day. Punah punar jayamana purani, says the Ushas Sukta. The example of Dr. Devi Gundappa of the demarcation between Shraddha and logic was excellent. And his citation of the words of Shankaracharya. So, Shruti Shatamapi Agnishitaha ityukte pramanyam nabhavati iti. So, his statement of, he made a reference to that. He also made a reference to the heliocentric theory that was proposed earlier by the Greek, which was all routed by the overriding Christian superstitious approaches. And he made a reference to the computation of the duration of the creation or the earth and so on. You can see the points that he made out, or Carl Sagan's Cosmos makes a reference to, he expresses wonderment at the fact that the figures given by Indians comes closest to the figures arrived at by the best of scientists. So, and the kind of superstition that is behind giving the birthday and the date of birth of the universe or of the atom. So, comparable to which we get no statement in the Vedas. That is why there has never been a conflict between science and religion in our country, whereas the West was constantly ridden by conflicts between the church and the state on the one hand, and the church and science on the other. He refers to the state of samadhi in which truths are realized. This is what Shvetashvatara Upanishad says. Te dhyana yoga anugata pashyan devatma shaktim sagunair nigudham. And he also referred to the mystery that Sanskrit is. And I just only today morning I referred to the statement of Professor Emeno of Berkeley, who said that India's greatest achievements are in the realms of language and mind, which are the toughest themes to handle, and only the barest fringes of which modern psychology has been able to touch. The most brilliant exposition of a very great idea. Though we are familiar with many parts of the ideas that he gave, to get a grand idea to make this presentation, so it is really extraordinary. We are extremely beholden to you, sir, for your brilliant exposition. Thank you very much, sir.
I didn't know that I was before such an intimidating audience. Thank you, sir.